Alberta Primetime with Michael Higgins.
Welcome to Alberta Primetime. Ahead tonight, our Friday panel on government guidelines for certain public libraries. But first, budget impact.
What I expect we'll hear is that a portion of Albertans will be upset at the size of the deficit. Understandable. And I think you'll hear a portion of Albertans that'll say we haven't spent nearly enough.
In tabling budget 2026, the Alberta government is pumping more funds into health and education while also projecting deficits of $9.4 billion this year, $7.6 billion in 2027-28, and $6.9 in the year following. That would mark 4 straight years of fiscal shortfalls. Joining us now, Deborah Yedlin, President and CEO of the Calgary Chamber of Commerce. Ms. Yedlin, good to see you. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
All right. What is to be made of the financial position the government now finds itself in, especially given we're not that far removed from being in significant surplus territory?
Well, I mean, this is the size of this budget deficit is not insignificant. It's double what was expected in the shortfall of 2025-26. And so what this really shows us is that we need to diversify our revenue streams, that relying on non-renewable resource revenue, which is 20% of the budget revenue target, is too much. We are price takers. We cannot control the price of oil or natural gas. And so we need to figure out how do we make sure that we have alternative revenue streams so that we're not in this deficit position.
Well, and maybe in that vein, there's no plan being presented for a return to balanced budgets. How concerning is that from the perspective of the business community?
Well, I think that's very concerning because if you continue to stay into deficit and you need to continue to borrow, we know that the borrowing costs are already going to increase significantly to $3.4 billion, and that assumes you maintain your credit rating. If your credit rating just starts to deteriorate, your cost of borrowing is going to go up even further. And so finding a path to black, so to speak, is very important. It is not articulated in this budget, and we need to see some more definitive business plans from the government to see where those investments are going to actually result in a return.
In the wake of the budget, lots of talk in both Calgary and in Edmonton on the province increasing property taxes. What kind of pressure do you see that bringing to bear?
I think that's going to be could be the canary in the coal mine, so to speak, to see the average homeowner in Alberta, in Calgary, having to pay $340 extra, and it's double what they will have to pay in Edmonton. That's not insignificant, especially during a time of uncertain economic times. We know that, even though Alberta's growth is expected to exceed other provinces and Canada in 2026, it still doesn't mean that there is uncertainty. We have CUSMA that's still on the table for renegotiation. We know that there is significant downward pressure on oil prices. That is challenging, and so to have to add that burden to homeowners and business owners as well is going to be an unwelcome surprise to many Albertans.
What do you like about the budget where Alberta's road forward is concerned? Are there elements there that strike the right note?
Well, I think, I don't envy the finance minister at all. He had to figure out how to try to very fine line. We know we needed increases investments in healthcare. We did see that. We knew that we needed increases in investment in education, and we did see that. So I think that's really important. There is money that's being set aside for infrastructure. That's also very important. And we have, another more money going into attracting investment into Alberta. So I think that's really those are positives. But those come with trade-offs. And when you have a sort of a challenged fiscal environment, when you have, like I said, downward pressure on oil prices, it's tough to figure out what those priorities are. But we definitely needed to see continued investments in healthcare and education, in infrastructure, and we did see that. But the offset is that we're going to be in a deficit position.
All the talk of separatism, the petition push for a referendum, how's that landing with the business community at a time when provincial finances are as challenged as they are?
Well, anything that increases uncertainty from an investment standpoint will cause investment to sit on the sidelines. And at a time when it's not just, we're facing global economic uncertainty, having any element of that inserted into the investment climate in Alberta is troubling. So let's remember, we compete for capital the world over. Anything that causes an element of uncertainty, the capital will go somewhere else. And that's not what we need right now, neither as a province or as a country.
Anything to suggest this building separatism dialogue is already having an impact?
There are a lot of conversations that are happening behind closed doors. I think it's on the risk register of every company, and we're just hearing people raising concerns about what this means from an investment standpoint.
Okay, it's on the risk register. What would you say the business community is then expecting of the provincial government in quarterbacking this referendum conversation?
Well, I think, what we have to remember is that it's really important that we have an opportunity to grow our resource production, to, increase our egress off the West Coast. That requires both producers and the builders of a pipeline to risk multi-decade dollars in terms of capital and billions of dollars. So what we really need is policy durability and certainty that provide the assurances for companies to risk that capital. And right now, anything that increases the uncertainty is going to cause the investment to sit on the sidelines. So we need that temperature to come down.
Okay. And Deborah, if we bring the conversation back full circle, and I'll preface it by saying Albertans have long had little appetite for talking about something like a provincial sales tax, but how much room is there in the here and now for a provincial conversation on tax structure, to your earlier point, financial stability?
Well, this is something we've talked about for a very, very long time. We can't be beholden to natural resource revenues over which the price we have no control. There is, if you want certainty for the province, we live on this sort of sine wave of investment and austerity because of the oil price and the natural gas price. If we had some certainty that would be provided from a revenue standpoint through a provincial sales tax, that would be net benefit in terms of the government being able to continuously invest in programs, not having to catch up, which is what we consistently feel like we have to do if we pull back one year and then have to inject more expenditures the following year. We need some certainty from a revenue standpoint. And I think, this has been a conversation that we've also had for a long time. From a business standpoint, too, I think you want to know that the jurisdiction that you're investing in has a stable framework so that if you are looking to invest in an area, that there's no risk that other things could be underinvested in, and that could compromise your ability to attract labor to whatever you're doing. And so I think it's a bigger conversation, and it's something that we've many people have talked about. And I think that the finance minister actually alluded to that about whether we're going to find out if we're debt averse or tax averse. So I'm wondering if that conversation is starting to gain a bit more traction.
Yeah, he pushed that as a kitchen table conversation.
Yes,
all right, we'll have to leave it there. Appreciate your time as always, Deborah. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Deborah Yedlin, President and CEO of the Calgary Chamber of Commerce.